Welcome to Stories from Palestine podcast, a podcast recorded in Palestine and about Palestine. My name is Crystal, I studied history and tour guiding, and I live in Palestine with my Palestinian husband and children. I started this podcast during the COVID pandemic in the summer of 2020, and now that tourism is slowly coming back to Palestine, I will continue the podcast bi-weekly. So subscribe on your podcast player and turn on the notifications if you want to be reminded of new episodes. You can also follow Stories from Palestine on Facebook and Instagram, where I will share a virtual soundbite of each new episode. Apo, I'm sitting here with you on the roof of Singer Cafe. That will mean for our listeners, they may have a little bit of background noise here and there, but right now it is our best option.
Yeah, the neighbors are fighting.
Fighting neighbors. If there's anybody passing by want to sell batik or faraule, we will hear that. But it is also a strange day because it is a strike again. We are in a very difficult time, I feel, in Palestine. Most of the shops and places around us are closed. We also have at the moment going on a solar eclipse. So I don't know, Apo, but I think we chose a really interesting moment to record.
It's the end of the world. That's it.
Yeah, the end of the world as we know it. But I want to talk to you about the Armenian community in Palestine. But before we get into that, for our listeners who do not know Apo, although I think if you love Palestine, at least you should know Apo and the Apostles, which is your music band. But give us a little bit of an introduction. Who are you and what do you do in life?
All right. I'm Apo. I'm an Armenian born and bred in the Armenian quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. Besides that, I'm a musician, a very awful one. I mean, I would correct what you said. If you love Palestine, you should not listen to our band. It will give you a very awful impression of the Palestinians. And I am a musician mostly. I deal in arts and culture. I have various artistic projects that I do during the day.
I'd be interested a little bit to hear more what you do during the day, because I always see you going around, moving around. But what is it? How do you spend your days?
Well, I wake up. First thing I do is gym, because, I'm fat and I need to take care of my body, more or less. The other thing is, after that, I go down to Jerusalem. There's a cultural house in Jerusalem that I am part-time artistic director. There are some projects that I need to do, which is, it's called Filbet. It's somewhere it's next to Yes Planet Amateur. That's half of the day, or even less. Then I'm in the studios, whether it's in Bethlehem or in Jerusalem. Then I'm on my laptop, looking at the statistics of the various projects that I have, checking out how many streams I have, what are the analytics. Then it's organizing shows or other things. It's a lot of it's maintenance and upkeep usually, but I don't need to be in a single place to do it. That's why I just go around, like coming to Singer and having coffee. Although I don't drink coffee, but I come and have coffee.
Oh, drinking water around. And Apo, you also recorded several podcast episodes, right?
Yeah, but not as good as Stories from Palestine.
Oh, thank you. I will take that as a compliment. But what was that? Where can people listen to that?
Apo and the City, it's on Spotify. I think, maybe it's on Google too, but I'm such a Spotify kid that I don't really know if there are other platforms that are worth it, So for now, it's definitely on Spotify, but I've heard that it's on Google too, so they can hear it. It's not as, it's about, I've interviewed various people from Jerusalem. The neighbors are still fighting behind us, right? The background noise, right? There's something going on. But they basically, that's what I do. But that is also part-time. I'm like half-assed in everything that I do. So everything is half-assed. But no, and I might do it again, but for now, I'm not,
No, but people can still listen back to those episodes. So if you go to Apo and the City, you can hear him talking to several interesting people from Jerusalem. But we are going to talk about the Armenians in Jerusalem because I mean, in general, Palestine is a country that's very multicultural and pluralistic, although it was like that for many centuries until there was one group of people that came here in the beginning of the 19th century and claimed it all for themselves and started a kind of monoculture. Not the Armenians, no. It's another group of people. But there are so many different peoples actually in Palestine, and especially in the old city of Jerusalem. We always talk about the four quarters of Jerusalem, which supposedly are the Jewish quarter, the Muslim, the Christian, and the Armenian quarter. I would say that you can add several other quarters to that. We talked about the Afro-Palestinian quarter. There's definitely a lot of Greek people. There is a Gypsy community. So there are definitely more than that. And Palestine in general consists of people who have come and left their imprint on this country. But Armenians, I always feel that they are part of Palestine, and on the other hand, they really have a separate identity. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. But first, let's establish, how did Palestine get such a large Armenian community? Not where did they come from? We know where they came from, but when did they come and how did they establish themselves here?
Okay. The neighbors are Can you hear that? This is what the Armenians came to. We didn't know that. No, so there are three official or standard waves that we can talk about. Because I don't want to go back 1,000 years before. When we were pagans, we also had a big empire, and that reached until Akka, like an acre in English, right? It reached until that, but only like for a few years, because people here started to throw stones at our emperor and Molotov cocktails, and emperor was like, "Screw this shit! I'm going back to the mountains and to Armenia." But that is a wave that we don't need to talk about, more or less. So the first official wave started during the Crusades, because the Armenians had we had a separate kingdom on the Mediterranean coast, which was made up of the Armenian elite that had escaped the Armenian highlands in the Caucasus when the Turks came. So the elites, they migrated to the Mediterranean coast, pretty down south and west, and they had a kingdom of Cilicia, Sicilia, not Sicily, Sicilia. And it was actually stop of the Crusades. And the first three Crusader Queens of Jerusalem, I'm being very specific here, first three Crusader Queens of Jerusalem were Armenian from that kingdom. They were married to the French kings and whatever that came here. So with them, they brought a lot of like the Armenians from the kingdom of Cilicia. This is just to simplify it for foreigners. That is the first like wave of Armenians. Some of them are still in our community in Jerusalem today. We still point out some of the people that have been here since then. We call them in Armenian kakatsi. It literally means a city dweller, but we use it in a way that they are indigenous because they've been here for centuries. And when I say we, I'm talking about the second wave. We are the genocide wave. We came here starting 1915 to 1923. Like my family came here in 1923. But before that, during the years of the genocide with its ups and downs, a lot of the Armenians came here, whether they escaped from the deportation camps or the extermination camps that the Ottoman Turks had set up in Syria, in the desert of Syria. So that's how they ended up here. My family specifically ended up here in a different circumstance, which we can come to. But that is the second wave, the refugees, and we call ourselves the Kahtagans, which are the refugees. So you have the Kakatsis, the Crusaders, simplified, and then you have the refugees like me. And then you have a third wave, which doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think in a few years they will make a bigger presence, which are the Armenian, officially they're Armenian Jews because they came after the Soviet Union fell. And in Israeli narrative, they only call them the Russians, right? That only Russians came. But a lot of them are actually Georgians, Moldovans, Ukrainians, and Armenians. Armenians that are married to Jews, or their grandmother is Jewish, or one of their grandparents or parents are Jewish. So they also came here, and they're probably, by quantity, they're probably more than us, the Armenians that are Christian officially, because we're pre-state Armenians, right? You have to look at it also like because they came during the state of Israel, so you can only be Jewish to make a migration here. We've been here, so we're Christian officially. They are Jewish officially on their birth certificate, I assume. but they amount to like 5,000, while the Armenian Christians like me were maybe 3,000. You talk about Jerusalem. When I say Jerusalem, I'm also putting in Bethlehem in this, okay? Jerusalem, Jaffa, and Haifa. These are the pre-state Armenian Christians. Now, if you include the third wave, which are the Soviet Armenians, that's what we call them, and we call them the Soviets. You'd have around, like, if you put their 5,000, that's actually a lot. But not all of them are interactive with the community of Jerusalem, because the Armenian community of Jerusalem is the mother community. It's like the mothership here because of the convent and all that. But many, at least 1,000 of them, come during Easter. They're practically Christian, but officially Jewish. It's a bit of a, yeah. Well, if you hear the rabbis of Israel, they always complain that the Russians are not real Jews, right? That they're still Christians. So there is some truth to it, because a lot of these, even one of the altars at our churches are built by the money of the Armenian Jews in Petah Tikva, like that, which is an interesting thing. This is how the Armenians have ended up in this small piece of land.
Now, I'm very curious how all these Armenians relate to the state of Israel or Palestine, and what kind of identity cards they have, because we know that Israel has a very complicated system of identity cards and residencies, citizenship, not citizenship. So how does that work with the Armenian community?
Okay, I'll answer on the identity thing, then we can go to the gritty details of like what cards they hold, like identity papers. I think each wave has a different answer to your question, because if you look at the Armenians that have been here for centuries, the Crusader waves, by the time the Armenian refugees came here, my wave, they were Arabized, the Armenian, because they were speaking in Arabic mostly. Their connection to Armenian nationality was through the church, because we have an Armenian national church, which you can only be in Armenia to be part of it. So their connection was through the church only. So when the refugees came, I think we gave a revitalization within them also with the Armenian language and all that. So, but however, because they were Arabized for like 7 years, I guess. And even today, when they speak in Armenian, they still have an accent, which we make fun of. We're like, oh, that's a funny accent in Armenian. But they probably would identify a lot more with Palestinian culture. I don't know politically speaking, but maybe culturally, because they just grew up here. Not grew up here. They are descendants of a certain history package, right? I come from the second wave, and the second wave came here on a very different basis. The second wave, the refugees came here to preserve an identity. It was the whole point of establishing schools and institutions and social clubs and all that, which were done by political parties of Armenia that were exiled during the Soviet times. When the Soviet Union was first established, it was simply to preserve the identity, and there has always been this emphasis that nationally speaking, identity, you are an Armenian, and that is only it, which I subscribe to. I'm one of those people. So when it comes to Israel Palestine, I think this wave of refugees, first of all, they came with trauma, and they came in a very close-knit shape, which I think by the time they probably wanted to break out and interact with the different people here, there were wars, right? The 48 war and all that. So they always stayed within the Armenian bubble, and even politically speaking, because even if there are a lot of stories within the Armenian community of Jerusalem, but all of those stories have to do with Armenia itself when it was under the Soviet Union. All of the scandals, the problems, the controversies, the fights and all that has nothing to do with Israel and Palestine. It all has to do with whether you were with the Soviets or you were against the Soviets, Your neighbors still fighting. That was it. That was basically it. So I think they had a more, I don't want to say neutral, because sometimes people, they twist the word neutral, But I think politically speaking, they were not that, I don't know, not aware, or maybe not that vested in the politics that goes on here. Here, they just wanted to survive, and but that was also the wave that spoke Arabic and Hebrew at the same time, and they knew enough people, they had integrated enough within society here that I don't know how to simply explain it, but like that second wave built the foundations of the geopolitics that I and my generation sort of play. That we know how to sit with Palestinians and talk with Palestinians, but we can also, at the same time, probably, maybe to the dislike of a lot of Palestinians, we can go to the West Jerusalem and have coffee with an Israeli, and that, because we've learned the geopolitics of that second wave, where it was only about being an Armenian, and that is that there is only one flag that you bow to. It's the Armenian flag. There is only one anthem. It's the Armenian anthem. There's only one cause in your life. That is the Armenian cause. And there was this idea that the reason why our grandparents survived the genocide and all that was to preserve the identity. So if you give up that identity or adopt another one, you are betraying the survival stories of our nation, and you are simply finishing the job that the Turks started during the genocide. There was a very strong emphasis on it. And we are the wave that call ourselves Jerusalemite Armenians, which we can come to. You see, the only nationality we subscribe to is the Armenian nationality. The only locality is Jerusalem, because I live part-time in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, but I would never call myself a Yerevansky. Like I'm not. I am a Jerusalemite. So it was the second wave of refugees that came up. There is a word in Armenian, Sari Mahai, which means Armenian Jerusalemite. And I think it was a way to combine our national identity with the national imagination of Armenia with our local intimacy of Jerusalem. That's the second wave when it comes to identities. The third wave, if we're talking about the Soviet Armenians that came here as Jews, naturally they're going to be more identified as Israelis because they only came here in the 90s and they came to Israel, right? They probably came to Israel because they knew the economy is better and all that. They did not come to any other place, right? So they would identify, I think, more as Israeli. But again, when you sit around with the Soviets, a lot of like the Russians, they're also a bit like, I don't know, I feel like they're sometimes a bit aloof about like, don't go deep politics with them. They'd be like, dude, I'm just here to work, to survive, like to make my money and send money back to Russia or to Armenia. Once you go very political with them, you lose them at some point because they're just not here. I don't think they're here for politics, and I don't know. But these are the identities. As when it comes to the papers, passport holders, if you're in Jerusalem, I think Jerusalem now the majority are citizens of Israel. I think the majority, but there are still Armenians that are East Jerusalemite residents. They used to be all of them. Not all. I think most of them used to be that. But the Armenians of Jerusalem don't have the same taboo that maybe the Palestinians have when it comes to applying for citizenship. Although I can also argue right now the Palestinians in Jerusalem have done away with that taboo as well. But maybe because of the national difference, the Armenians were a bit 20 steps ahead of that taboo. But for years they kept the Palestinian line of East Jerusalem where you don't apply. But then I think in the 90s, everybody just did it. So majority would be, but again, there's still a significant minority that is not, that they are not citizens. The Armenians in Haifa and Jaffa, in 48, they all became Israelis. And of course, the Soviet Armenians are also Israelis. Yeah. There's also a very small community in Bethlehem that are descended from the Crusader times as well. They're also part of the first wave. They are West Bank. I think I don't know numbers because I know there are a few families. We're talking about one family, two families. I don't know if they hold green ideas because I usually see them in Jerusalem. So I don't know exactly. I've never asked them. But the one family that I do know, and they're the big family here, they're always in Jerusalem. And I know some of them have East Jerusalemite residents. Some of them are citizens too of Israel. So I don't know.
Yeah, and even if they were West Bankers, they may get permits to enter into Jerusalem.
Yeah, they may get permits to enter, and they might even get an Armenian passport. So they might be like West Bankers, Palestinian West Bankers, but they'll have an Armenian passport. So yeah. That
was going to be my next question. Is like, how is your relation, maybe in general as Armenians, but especially also your personal story to Armenia? I understand what you say that people, especially the second wave, they came, they fled, and they wanted to really maintain their own identity. And so there's a lot of focus on that. But now, when you visit Armenia, how do you feel there when you are there? And how do Armenians there perceive you as you are a Jerusalem Armenian?
Look, I mean, my answer is not any different than any diasporan, your general diasporan, right? Because if you're a diasporan of any nationality born outside of the homeland, yeah, you're always going to be an outsider someplace, right? I was saying it last night to somebody, like a diasporan does not have a home. They have rooms. You know, like you have a room here, you have a room there. We have a room in Jerusalem, we have a room in Armenia, you know? But at the end of it, it's about the decision that you make for the next generation. And the decision that I made for myself personally is, if God willing, one day I have kids, I want them to be born in Armenia, to live in Armenia, because I don't want them to be diasporan. I'm a self-loathing diasporan. Although some people might say there are privileges in being a diasporan, which there are. Like you see the world, right? You're more multicultural, not multicultural, just multicultured in the sense. But when I go to Armenia, I feel, look, I've been going to Armenia for like many times. Like I'm not a local, but I'm a loco. Like I'm half there, you know. There are things that I don't like, but there are also things that I love. And what I've always liked about the Armenians is that we do not ask about identities, right? The Armenian imagination or mythology, in a sense, does not care about what passport you hold or where you're born. You're an Armenian. You're part of this, you know. We don't ask extra questions. And that is what I like being. Because even here in Jerusalem, everyone's trying to, like, you know, to drag you into their camp, into their tribal identity. And they just don't get it that, dude, it's all just imaginations. Let me go with the Armenian imagination. Like, I don't need to resign from one imagination to join another imagination, you know? Leave me my irrationalities in this life. One of them being an Armenian, you know, the Armenian patriotism that I like. That's one irrationality that I want to enjoy in this life, right? And in Armenia, they allow it. Like, that's what I like. Like, nobody asks too many questions. Although everyone asks me, where is Jerusalem? They have no idea about Jerusalem. Like, they think it's Egypt, right? No. When I tell them, yeah, a lot of people. Older people especially. Older people. I think, because older people, like, their solar system is the Soviet Union and the post-Soviet Union. They have, like, you know, they know Brezhnev. They don't know Saddam. You know, like, they don't know Bibi, Arafat, all these people, whoever, you know, we're in Singer. There's a mural of, like, a lot of people there. No, but they don't know anything, but maybe Castro. Maybe they might know. No, it's Che Guevara and Castro. Maybe, right? They don't know anybody. You don't have no Slav there. They'll know the Slavs, you know? But, yeah, so that's always funny there when I have to explain to them. Once I had to explain to a group of Armenians, they thought that Jews were Christian. And then one of them said, no, Jews are Muslim. I was like, no, Jews are Jews. They didn't understand. Like, what do you mean Jews are Jews? I said, they have their own religion. But because they come from the Soviet Union, in the Soviet Union, I assume the Jews were seen as a nationality, not as a religion, right? Wow. So their whole idea of it, no, but they must have a religion. And it was hard for me to explain it to them. But again, saying all this, I still love being in Armenia. And because we were brainwashed here in Jerusalem in one sense of that you're an Armenian, your cause, your life is for Armenia's benefit and all that. So when I go there, you sort of, I'm not going to say the fulfillment of it, but you feel closer to that brainwashing that you got for years. So like, this is why we were brainwashed. Yeah. But then, look, there are also a lot of shortcomings in Armenia. They're like, especially if you come from Jerusalem. And again, this might not sound appealing to a lot of people, but because that's a truck. That's not a bomb. Relax. That's a truck. No, but because we come from Jerusalem, and at some point you're proximate to the Israeli economy. Yeah. So, I mean, you also see, okay, what it is like to be in a rich country, more or less. But then you go to a post-Soviet country, like, shit, like Armenia's not as rich as where I come from, right? So that's one of the shortcomings. But then the advantage of it, or the good side of it is, but I feel comfortable in Armenia. Like I feel at home at some sense, right? That, okay, so what if we're not rich? We will be rich together. Like we're going to work on this, you know?
But in what sense is Armenia rich if you talk about heritage and culture, can you, for people who never met Armenians, who don't know anything about Armenia, what are typical Armenian parts of your culture?
Look, this is a very good question, but it's a very long answer. No, I'll tell you why. We are your typical small nation that believes that we created the world, but nobody knows about us and nobody's appreciating our contribution to the development of the world. However, so that development never came back to the homeland. I don't know how that happens, but like those are the Armenians, right? But the fact is, when you open up any like history book, or like the Armenians have a mythology of 4,000, 5,000 years, right? We've been around, but I'm also saying the Armenians and the Proto-Armenians, like the people that we trace our heritage to, right? You can actually trace it. There's like a continuous line, and we've done shit like throughout 5,000 years, right? And I mean, if you go to Armenia, we have our pagan history that we still keep. We have our Christian history, which is we were the first Christian nation, state, kingdom, whatever, as we like to say. So like you're walking around and you're seeing churches, like you walk in a simple village and then you see a church that's from the 4th century. It's just abandoned, but it's like it's in the backyard of a farm. Like, my God, man, like if the Pope finds out about this, what he'd do? Like, this would be costing trillions in Western Europe. But in Armenia, it's like, yeah, okay, dude, that's 4th century. Come to my house. I'll show you a 3rd century church.
So it's the first nation that adopted Christianity as a nation, as a state religion.
State religion, yes, we were the first. But then you also, when you look at the Caucasus, the region around us, it's also where wine comes from. But nobody really knows this because they think wine comes from the Italians and the French. You're like, maybe they made it better. I don't know. I'm not a wine expert, but I know wine comes from the Caucasus. That is for sure. And we have literature, we have embroidery, all of this. It's but we have been very bad at marketing it to the world. And I think we don't want to market it to the world. We have this superiority complex, which has a fear in it that if we show something, they'll steal it from us. So let's not show it. So we don't. You can even, I'll even, since we're speaking to a Palestinian audience, more or less, there's like some Arabic songs that are shared in the Levant with the Lebanese and the Palestinians and the Syrians, like Fatum Fatum Fatume, right? That is an Armenian song that a Lebanese comedian took. He heard it from the Armenian refugees in Lebanon, turned it into an Arabic song. But the Palestinians right now, if you tell them, dude, this is not Arabic. They're like, no, man, you Armenians took it from us. You're like, so why should I fucking show you any other song? You're basically appropriating my songs. But because, you're victims of the 21st century, we have to let it go. No, I'm not going to let it go. That's my culture. So the Armenians don't like to show it. But there is also a sadder answer to this, that look, the Armenians, our colonization was by the Turks, right? And they simply destroyed the land. They didn't leave anything to show of those 3,000 to 4,000 years. I mean, sometimes people talk about white colonization. I'm like, they left a lot of things standing. Like, the Turks did not leave things standing, we have to talk about that sometimes. And so when you go, which is very sad, because if you go to Western Armenia, which is northeastern Turkey, we call it Western Armenia as a geographic space. If you go to northeastern Turkey, you have a city of Ani. Ani was, during the medieval ages, it was like the city of 1001 churches. It was like the seat of Armenian excellence, okay? Right now, if you go there, you definitely will not find 1001 churches, and the few churches that you find are completely destroyed, and nobody wants to fix them. They'll probably put a placard there, and they'll say, like, it'll be a Turkish governmental placard, and they'll say, oh, the local Christians in the medieval... Local Christians, man, these are like Armenian churches. They're not local Christians, So our problem sometimes is that we cannot show what we have done for all these years, all these thousands of years, because they've been destroyed completely. But sometimes, we have things to show as well. And sometimes when we want to show it, we don't show it. It's a complicated, schizophrenic sort of approach to your question.
If you look at Jerusalem, what did the Armenians contribute to the city of Jerusalem? We know there is something called the Armenian Quarter for people who've never been. Yeah. Can you describe the quarter and what can we see there that is Armenian?
Well, you'll see the Armenians. We have particular hair which is like thick and mountainous. That's one. And square heads. If you see somebody with a square head, know that is an Armenian or a Georgian pretending to be an Armenian. But before the Armenian quarter, I should say that the Armenian Patriarchate has been here since the Crusader wave that first happened. I think maybe even before that. I'm not really sure. So you have to ask a real historian. But the Armenian Patriarchate has been here for centuries. And yes, they went to the Armenian quarter. The Armenian quarter is the highest point in the old city. It's on Mount Zion. And when you say Mount Zion, you're definitely talking about the Armenian quarter there. And long ago, maybe a century ago, the Armenian Patriarchate had 72 churches and monasteries within the land of Palestine. 72. Now, I think there's only 10 or even less. I don't know. But there used to be 72. They even found a mosaic in Damascus Gate by accident. It was in a falafel shop, and the falafel guy saw a leak, and he just I don't know, he did some construction, and they came upon a mosaic. And the mosaic was an Armenian mosaic for the unknown soldier. There are a lot of mosaics for unknown soldiers, right? It's a European thing, maybe, I think, right? Right? But the Armenians had an unknown soldier mosaic from the 10th century, 12th century in Jerusalem. Now they've taken that mosaic from Damascus Gate and they've put it in the newly opened Armenian Museum in the Armenian Quarter. Mm-hmm. They've laid it on the floor so you can see the whole. It's a huge mosaic. So the Armenians have they have a lot of properties here. They've had a lot of symbols of their their possession of a lot of things there. And the Armenian Quarter itself, there are a lot of theories of how it came to be. But I'm just going to probably take the bias perspective that one of the queens, the Crusader Queens, the Armenian Crusader Queens, gave it to the Patriarchate. And then it was there. The civilians, though this is the important difference. The first wave of Armenians, the Crusaders, lived in the quarter. Mm. But the convent, the Armenian convent, the St. James Convent, is the biggest part of the quarter, but it's in the middle of the quarter. And it's a city within a city. You cannot go in if you're not an Armenian or with an Armenian. But the Armenians of the first wave lived, and they still do, in the Armenian quarter. The refugees, when they came, they took lodging inside the convent. There were a lot of lodges for the pilgrims. But the Armenian refugees, they came and they just took it over. So right now, if you go to the Armenian convent, you're only going to see 20 priests, but you're going to see 200 civilians. Like me. I lived in the quarter, not in the convent. Mm. But when we say the Armenian convent, it's less of a convent and more of a city. You can definitely see a priest and I don't know, a girl with a skirt and going to a party inside the convent. Because we have social clubs with alcohol. So people drink and party and dance and smoke weed, but we're not supposed to talk about that. But that is what it is. It has a very vibrant sort of I'm not going to say non-religious, but it has its own civilian life parallel to the priesthood that exists there. A lot of people that go to the Armenian quarter, they're usually just on the edges of the quarter and not inside the convent. Yeah. And they'll say, but you Armenians, there's nothing to see. It's one street. I'm like, yeah, but we want it that way. In Armenia that you talked to, we do not want to bring people in the convent. Yeah. We want it's our space. Stay out. You can come in when I guess it's still the same. We allow them in when we bring them in, but we are definitely very territorial in that sense. We don't. So that's why you see in the Armenian. It's very clean. It's the cleanest quarter. It's the quietest one too. But it has a Mediterranean touch. It has as if it's a cut off from Sicily or something. Yeah. It's very much like that.
No, thanks for clarifying that, because for me, when I walk, you go in through Jaffa Gate and then you have the citadel on the right.
The Armenian quarter.
Oh, is it? Jaffa Gate is Armenian.
Jaffa Gate is Zion Gate. That is officially. Whatever you see on your right side is the Armenian quarter. Whatever you see on your left side is the Christian quarter.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And then as an outsider, I will walk through that main road with kind of circles around the actual Armenian quarter. And you see a few Armenian restaurants and taverns. And then you're like, okay, that's it. But now I understand that there is this whole...
whole life is within the convent. Yeah. Everything happens within the convent. It's a different city.
And everything that happens in the convent stays in the convent.
Of course. when the pilgrims from Armenia come, they have no idea that they're coming to a not to a convent.
And how many churches are there in
the convent? Three. There are three churches: St. James, the Archangels, St. Thomas, or Thaddeus. But that church, the third one, is closed off because it's in a house. Like, to enter it, you have to go through a living room of a person, and then you end up there. But and that church, they have all of the archives. But yeah, but its main two churches, St. James, where we are baptized, and when we die, the mass takes place there. So it's our mega and omega, our beginning and our end. And Archangels is where we do the wedding ceremonies, the wedding mass.
Oh, that's an interesting question then. Marriage. Do you have to marry an Armenian woman, or can you marry outside of the community?
Oh, we don't have a rule or something like that. But, people have the impression that the Armenians marry amongst each other, which to a certain point it is true. But also, when you look at the statistics, you see that it's not as true as you think. The Armenians in Jerusalem, you could say a lot of them do come from mixed marriages, predominantly with Palestinian Christians, because I'm sure you know this, there is no civil marriage here. So you got to marry within the religion.
Yeah.
So, you know this.
That's how I became a Muslim. With an atheist husband.
There's only very few people that I know that are married to Muslims and Jews. There's also one family that's mix of all. Oh, yeah. Wow. The last weddings that I've been, the last few marriages that I've been to, I think they're half-half. Some have married Palestinian Christians. Some have married Armenians. There was a trend, probably still is, that right now the Armenians, sometimes they marry like Armenians from Armenia, whether wives or husbands. Like, we import now, trying to...
They bring them here, or they move back to Armenia then?
I have no idea why they're bringing them here. I guess because it goes back to the economy, right? If work is better here, then they prefer that, they base their lives here. Although I always feel bad for the person that's coming from Armenia, because Armenia it's bigger than Jerusalem, but it's also built bigger than Jerusalem, right? Like, I think one of them was a villager, one of the women that married into the Jerusalem community. But if you're from a village in Armenia, your backyard is a mountain. Yeah. You know how big of a space? It's the size of Bejela. That's your backyard, Then you're coming to Jerusalem, to the Armenian convent, where your neighbor's toilet is next to your living room. Everything is so, on top of you. They're stacked above each other. I feel very bad, Sure, the economy might be better here, but I don't know if the living standard is better, Because at some point, if you're always stressed out, like, imagine being an Armenian Jerusalemite and telling your Armenian wife from Armenia, hey, don't go to that street. No, but don't go to this street. Oh, no, today's Saturday or Friday, we don't go. Yeah. She'd be like, dude, I come from a country of Armenia, 99% Armenians. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, that will definitely take time to adapt to. Yeah. Hey, and what is it that Armenians contributed to Palestine? Maybe food-wise, culture-wise? What kind of jobs do Armenians do here?
Photography is a big thing that we've contributed. That has to do with a patriarch that we had, I think, 120 years ago. I forgot his name. But we had a patriarch that brought the first... We've brought the first printing press. Printing press, I'm 50%, 60% sure about it. No. But there might be. And also photography, I'm 100% sure about it. He brought photography. We were the first school. Okay, I'll tell you a very funny story. But even the travelers, you say that the Armenians were the only ones that had mixed schools with girls and boys. And there's an Armenian story about why the 67 war happened. It has to do a lot with us, not with Jews and Arabs. You guys are not the most important people in the world. Apparently, during the Jordanian times, from 48 to 67, the Jordanian authorities wanted the Armenian patriarch to build a different building for the girls. Because they said in Jordanian times, you cannot have mixed schools. And the Armenians were like, okay, but they were delaying the decision until the Jordanian authorities decided that starting from September 67, the Armenian school would not have a license to teach unless they built a separate school for the girls. So apparently the Armenian Patriarch and the Jordan authorities scheduled a meeting for June 7th, 1967. but that the war started that day. And there's a story that the Armenians actually instigated the war so they don't have to build. So that, we still want our mixed schools like to last. So we contributed that, free, equal education. Ceramics, you can say, the Al-Aqsa tiles were done by some Armenian families that came from the Ottoman Empire. Although now the Hebronites have stolen all of the designs and are selling it cheap, which is actually a very big concern of the Armenian families that deal in ceramics, right? They're very concerned about it. We've done this. Music, you can also say music. I'm not talking about myself here. But during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there were a lot of rock and roll school bands and Frere, Terra Santa, the Armenian school. And a lot of them were Armenians and Assyrians. And they were like big in like this East Jerusalem elitist scene, more or less, but it was like a big thing there. And so the Armenians sort of contributed to that as well. What else?
Food.
The lamajun. People call it sfiha Armenia. We call it lamajun, but if you go to like the real word, I think it has to be mashbat mis, because even lamajun is in Arabic, lahmu ajin. But in Armenians, we got lazy and we just call it lamajun. But in proper Armenian, it would be something like mashvat mis or something. But we contributed that, right? We give, I think even the kubbe, which we call kufta, ichli kufta, it comes from the Armenians. But look, I'm not going to like badmouth Palestinian cuisine. I think they've had good food. Although I think the Syrians have better food, but who am I to judge? But yeah, we've done this. What else? That's basically it.
Yeah.
I don't think anything more.
Well, that's quite a lot for such a small population.
We've only been there for a few years, man. Give us and we're dwindling. Our numbers are dwindling. We gave you enough. That's it. We're out. This is the end.
Did you say how many Armenians you think there are in all of Palestine? If we say historic Palestine?
In Jerusalem, I'm pretty sure there's, maybe on the best day in Jerusalem, there's 800. This includes the Bethlehemites. There's 800, maybe. In Jaffa, 300. In Haifa, 300. But these are pre-state Armenian Christians, right? But if we include the Petah Tikva ones, the Soviet Armenians, I don't know, it goes by 1,000, like it reaches 5,000. But the Armenians, we always have this thing that what makes you an Armenian? Is it the language? Is it the blood? Which probably it is. It is all that. But what we also take into consideration being active in the community. We're a very collectivist people, and if you're not active in some sort of way for the benefit of an Armenian collective, then you might be an Armenian, but we're like, but can we count you in or no? When there's trouble, can we count on you or can we not count on you? We need to count on. So that's how we probably count ourselves.
Hey, and do you guys participate in the Christmas here? Because we are in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is, of course, the place of the birth of Jesus. So what's the Armenian Christmas look like?
The Armenian Christmas of Jerusalem, or the Armenian congregations that are tied to the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem, which includes the Armenians in Jordan also. Oh. Yeah, it's like the rest of the churches here, right? It's Palestine and Jordan. Our Christmas is very weird. It's sorry to say this, but it's a messed up Christmas because Armenian Christmas the real Armenian Christmas is January 5th and 6th. In Armenia and the rest of the diaspora. 5th, 6th. That's Armenian Christmas. I think the Orthodox one is 6th, 7th, like the Greek Orthodox. But in Jerusalem, it's January 18th and 19th. And nobody knows. No, there are people that know it. Some people say it has to do with the calendar of the church. Some people say it's status quo from the Ottoman times, so that the Armenians and the Greeks don't share the altar the same day. So they've delayed it by 2 weeks. Because we do New Year's on January 13th, which is the old Orthodox New Year's. But then we do Christmas after New Year's. And you're like, okay, that's messed up. Do you not see how? We know it's messed up. There's no way to change it because unless you want to start World War III. Like Ukraine and Russia will not even compare to what will happen if we do this. Nuclear will happen from first minute. So we can't change it. It is what it is. But what we do is we celebrate December 25th with everybody. We do January 6th sometimes, and then we do January 18th. But the real important day, because of all this messed up, We usually narrow down all of our celebrations on January 13th, which is the old New Year of the Orthodox Christians. So Santa Claus, for example, if you want to see them in the Armenian quarter, they'll usually be around on January 13th, on New Year, old New Year's. Because it's just January 6th, you can't do shit. No. January 18th, it's too late. You don't already have the appetite. So you choose the 13th. You're like, Orthodox are celebrating either way. Just let's celebrate with them. But whatever, we do Christmas on that day. It's messed up. It doesn't make sense. It does.
And you guys have your own scouts with the bagpipes and the drums that exist?
We have 2 Armenian clubs, social clubs. Actually, we have 3, but the 2 that have scouts. And one of them, the one that I'm part of, we play trumpet. The other one plays bagpipes, but I come from the trumpet part because we wanted to be special.
So you also play trumpet?
No. My scout troops play trumpet. I was the drummer with them. I was the drummer. No, we don't play bagpipes but there are 2 clubs. There are 2 Armenian clubs that are separate due to the Armenian politics that came during the Soviet Union years. So it's 2 different clubs with 2 different political ideologies regarding the Soviet Union and regarding post-Soviet politics in Armenia. Again, this is all based on the second wave. These divisions didn't happen because of Israel and Palestine. It happened because of the Bolsheviks and other things, That's it. Yeah.
And do you think all the Armenians that live in Jerusalem, do they speak Armenian?
All of them? Not all of them. And even those that do, that sometimes not all of them speak it well. Some of them speak it very slangishly, like it's very slang, very jargon. Like, when you hear it, you're like, oh, dude, you need to you need to study Armenian, man. That's not how you say that sentence, or that's not the word for it. Look, if you're an Armenian and your mother is Palestinian, or your grandmother, like let's say you have a Palestinian attribute in your family, odds are you're not going to speak good Armenian because I know I'm talking to a European audience, but like the mother raises the family at the end of the day, right? We're not in Scandinavia. Okay, the mother raises the family. So if the mother is not Armenian, let's say she's Palestinian, and because you live in an environment that's not Armenia, you live in an environment that's Palestinian, odds are the kids are going to speak in Arabic better than they are going to speak in Armenian. So when they grow up, their Armenian might be there, but it will not be as good or fluent as Arabic because of the surroundings, the mother.
But do you have a school, like an Armenian school?
We have an Armenian school that was established in 1920, 21, 23. It was established for the refugees. But then that's what I said. It was established by the refugees for the refugees. But then also the Crusader Armenians that have been Arabized started to attend. Thus, they got Armenian back into their lingo. Thankfully, I come from a family that were only speakers of Armenian, like we only spoke in Armenian. And the people around us, like our clique of the community, there was never, I guess, non-Armenian faces around. It was very like Armenian. So we always grew up speaking in Armenian and all that. I came from a very Armenian bubble. We had no idea about politics around here. Only until we grew up, we started to figure out. But that's why I tell, like, my brainwashing happened very good. Like, it was a good brainwashing,
Yeah. But obviously, you have a lot of Palestinian friends. You hang out a lot with Palestinians. You speak some Arabic, right? So I
speak good Arabic.
So we need to know now, how do you relate to what's happening? Because I can somehow feel that, and I feel that myself as a Dutch person living here, I feel very closely related and attached emotionally also to Palestinians. And I have kids growing up here, but still I can always sort of try to put myself as the outsider, which maybe also is a little bit of a protection to say like, well, I'm involved, but not really involved. Do you know what I mean?
I understand about the involved, not involved, but at a certain point, let's say this, there are certain things that you don't have a choice whether you want to get involved or not. Fact being that I'm not Jewish and I'm born in Jerusalem. So there are some bureaucratic administrative policies that will affect me as they will affect the Palestinian, due to the fact that, me and the Palestinian were not Jewish. There probably are some policies that are more strict on them, on the Palestinians, than me, because the Armenians were not a national threat. We don't claim this land as ours because there isn't a mountain here to begin with. So why would we claim this land? It's a barren land of desert. They say like Mount Hermon. That's a hill. That's probably a valley in Armenia. That's not even a mountain where I come from. you know. So we don't claim this land in any sort of way. We claim the Armenian quarter, like don't touch the Armenian quarter, but you know, we're not a threat to any national narrative here, right? So again, that is whether you want to get involved, whether or not there is a policy. If it's to benefit an exclusive group of people, whether you have a choice in it or not, you're going to face the bad side of it. You're going to face the bad side of it. There's nothing. And again, you do find anger in it, right? When you're traveling from the airport, right? There isn't much of a difference between me and my neighbor who's Palestinian. We're both from East Jerusalem, territorially, administratively speaking, because East Jerusalem does not really exist. It's an administrative term, not a geographic space, right? But I guess when it comes to politics, like, hey, what is your political vision of it? I usually don't answer it because I'm like, what does it matter what my political vision for this place is? It depends on what you guys want and who has the power to achieve. I'm a realist. I'm like very cynical realist. You have the power to determine, to dictate, do it. If you don't have it, try to get it. My energy, the bit that I have left in this life, I want to give it to Armenia. Because that is, again, the brainwashed imagination that I subscribe to. If you're asking energy from me, you're probably not going to get it. Because we also have problems in Armenia. And I also have, my people also have a struggle of, okay, we might have an independent state, but we still have enemies around us. And, you know, we have lands and people that we need to return back to their lands and the churches that we need to liberate again. So if I have an energy left, it's for that. And I'm not, because, okay, somebody can tell me, yeah, but Apo, but you're born here. You're definitely right. I'm born here. And you can definitely accuse me of like, I don't know, bailing ship. You can definitely do that. But yeah, but I have a ship that I was brainwashed to love. And so I'm going to love that ship, you know, especially since that ship has no problem accepting me. You know, they're like, yeah, come back. You know, this is yours, you know. So why not, you know? And
Apo, in 2020, Azerbaijan invaded parts of Armenia and you went there.
Yeah, it's something that I don't talk about a lot because I usually don't like to talk about it. But yeah, I went there just to see how I can help out. I ended up helping in translation and refugees that were running away from the Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, the part that got attacked. But that's where I leave it at, more or less. But yeah, because I really care about that land and like, and yeah.
Yeah. Could you see yourself eventually really moving there and living there if there was opportunity?
Well, this year I've actually spent 6 months in Armenia. Like I've actually done 6 months in Armenia this year. That was my goal. But yeah, I see myself moving there. No, I don't see why not. I'll always have a foot in Jerusalem and I have a lot of projects there. So I'm always going to come and go. But I would like there to be my base. The problem again with the diaspora is a diaspora. And it's very hard to uproot yourself. Although you're a result of an uprooting. But then you have to uproot yourself again, like, you know, voluntarily. It's a bit of an oxymoron. But I really care about the continuity of the Armenian people in their homeland. Again, we've been there for 5,000 years. And we have to, you know, I'd like to give my small bit of share in it. Look, when I'm 60 years old, I'm probably going to hang my coat of this Armenian patriotism and go travel the fucking world and be like, I'm done, man. I did I did this, you know. And yeah, but again, I see myself living there. Yeah, for sure. But it's a cool place. Like I don't see. By the way, living there doesn't mean I'm like doing a nationalistic. It probably does mean at some point, but it's peaceful being there. You're surrounded by your people. You're surrounded by good people, good fun, good food, good drinking, beautiful landscape. So why not? You know.
Yeah. And didn't the Ark of Noah also end up in Armenia?
According to the Bible, yeah, it ended up on Mount Ararat, which is now in Turkey. But to get a good view of it, you have to be in Armenia. Right. Because we have a better view of it, which means it's ours. We usually say it's Armenian because it's not ours. When it's not ours, it becomes even more Armenian because our whole mythology is on things that are not ours, but they used to be, you know. But yeah. Noah is there drinking wine, getting drunk.
Thank you very much for insight into the Armenian community in Palestine and in Jerusalem. And for all the listeners, if you want to listen to Apo and the Apostles, I would say find them on YouTube, Spotify, any kind of SoundCloud. I would say you are available.
If you're Russian and you're blocked off from all the platforms because of, the Russophobia that's happening against you guys, Yandex Music. Check us up on Yandex Music. We got to be fair to everybody, right? Right? Yeah. We got to be fair to everybody.
Thank you.
Cool.
Cool.
The neighbors stopped fighting halfway.
Thank you for listening. Please consider supporting the podcast with a donation. It is free to listen, but there are costs involved in the production and quite a lot of time. It's very much appreciated if listeners chip in, and you can already do that with a couple of bucks on the Ko-fi page. You can find the link in the show notes, as well as other links to the social media accounts and the website. I hope you will tune in again for the next episode. Every other week, a new one. If you enjoy listening to Stories from Palestine podcast, then I think you will also enjoy listening to my favorite podcast, which is called Jerusalem Unplugged. You can find it on most podcast players and on social media at Jerusalem Unplugged.